welcome to episode 22 of the Make Things Better podcast. Today I'm joined by Tim Brazier. Really pleased to have you on, Tim. It's been a while that I've been wanting to have a chat with you, so thanks for coming down. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. Getting towards the weekend, which is always a good part of the weekend.
Yeah, we tend to record these on a Friday, and I feel like everyone's in a much better mood going into the weekend. So do you want to start off by telling us like what your current role is? I know you're doing quite a few things.
So I'm currently managing director of a team called Thrive by Design. We're a design and research team based within the NHS actually. So we're hosted by Leeds and York Partnership Foundation Trust. So got an office up in Leeds and a base up in Leeds, but we work nationally and we're commissioned by all sorts of different parts of the NHS and other funders and kind of foundations. And our role is looking at how digital innovation and digital technology can help to tackle health inequalities, while at the same time making sure that the very rapid digital transformation of health and care that's happening at the moment doesn't compound those existing inequalities that people are facing, because it's very easy for that to happen, really.
Yeah, and I know you're quite into inclusive design and inclusivity in general, right? I was wondering what sort of piqued your interest in the whole inclusive side of things when it comes to design.
Yeah, I think there's I've always had a kind of real draw to kind of making things fair and making things equal for people, and back in previous roles when I was working much more heavily in digital agencies, like creating a lot of digital stuff, whether that be apps, websites, services, that sort of thing. It was only ever really talked about as kind of accessibility. So making your software, your platform accessible when people are there. And it was only when I kind of took a shift away from, it was project management that I was doing at the time in the early part of my career, into service design as a kind of real passion of mine, was you start to broaden your understanding of people's needs when they're trying to access different things, whether it's to access an app to complete a task, whether it's to access a service for information, all that sort of stuff. And you start to really understand that actually there are so many different factors that will mean that people are excluded from being able to participate or get the information they need, their support, or realise the benefits that are out there when, especially with digital and the internet and things that have happened over the last kind of couple of decades, really, is that's kind of really accelerated. So yeah, it was a real interest of mine to realise as soon as you start to understand and hear people's stories of how they are excluded and the disadvantages that they face, that I really got a passion for going, actually there's some injustice there that we can do a little bit more about, and we can put our energies in a better place to try and help overcome some of those.
Yeah, so you mentioned there about accessibility, and this might be a bit of a naive question, but I don't know much about this. So what's like the difference between making maybe like a website more accessible and then inclusive design as a whole?
I think accessibility is really important. So making sure people can use the thing depending on their needs. So I'm sat here as somebody who has very few issues using technology, but we know some of the kind of things like having screen readers, people with screen readers being able to use and kind of navigate through a site, making sure that things are adjustable for people, making sure that images are described, all that kind of basic stuff which should be a real given now. Whereas inclusivity is much more about the wider need for people to access sorts of things. So it comes down to things like the language that's used on a site to make people feel like this is something that they should be using, making sure that there are ways in which they are supported to be able to access them. So I know you've had Helen Milner from Good Things Foundation talking about digital exclusion and the work that they're doing around including people. There are so many different factors that would stop somebody being able to use digital technology in their lives, whether it's for enjoyment and pleasure, or whether it's for actually being able to access some really critical services for them. And we see things like universal credit being digital first. We could spend, and I know people are spending so much time and energy in making sure that platform is accessible, but there are so many barriers to people actually getting to that point where they're sat in front of a a screen being able to use that system. So yeah, just really trying to understand that inclusion is way wider than the thing that people are actually using when they're trying to complete that task.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense, because I guess like accessibility is about once that person's already taken that step to have the availability and like the opportunity to use that technology, but if they don't have that technology in the first place, then you know, exactly. They need that. So do you think you maybe got into this more through your experience working for the Good Things Foundation in a way?
Yeah, there was two real kind of step changes in my career. So prior to being at Good Things Foundation, I worked at UME, who were a Sheffield-based digital agency, and the work that we did there was really focused on using technology for good, for social good. So I got the great opportunity to work with a number of charities and other social enterprises, where they were looking at actually there's a real positive role for technology in supporting people that are in certain circumstances excluded or having particular negative experiences and tough experiences in their lives. So that kind of started the kind of interest. And then when you start to think, again, like I say, that was all about, we were building technology, we were building software, putting more of it out into the world. And then we started to have conversations about like it's assistive technology, and starting to understand actually there's so much wider challenges, like I say, to accessing that. So then at Good Things Foundation, kind of took a real step away from the making things and really starting to understand what is it that's stopping people being able to take advantage. And that's where you put technology away, you kind of move it out of the way and you go, actually, what are people actually trying to achieve here? What are their real needs? And what are the reasons why they can't just go and do it? Like I, in a very privileged position, are able to kind of pick a phone out of my pocket, access some information or complete an application form or do something that I'm very used to. There's, like I say, so many reasons why they can't. Really understanding those and making sure those are factored into the things when we're not just funding the development of technology, we're thinking about that much wider service and the support that is needed to help people gain access and take advantage of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's quite easy, not easy, but like let's say we've done like some user research sessions over the last like few weeks, and we'll just go put a post on social media and people will very kindly share that, and then people find out that we're doing user research, so that's how we can like make a site more accessible. But when it comes to people who aren't already maybe using digital as much and you want to include those type of people, how do you go about actually helping them and like discovering what their needs are?
Yeah, I think the thing you need to do is you need to take yourself out of your environment and go to where those people are. So a lot of things that we did with, and we do through Thrive by Design, and we're talking about people that are experiencing health inequalities. A lot of people assume that health inequalities are understood because we're part of the NHS and people turn up to an NHS front door and we start to understand, but a lot of those health inequalities are actually presenting in loads of other places across communities that aren't getting anywhere near an NHS front door. So we really need to go and spend our time within those communities, look at where they're accessing support around other things. So whether it be around welfare, whether it be about employment, things like that, there are people, community and organisations supporting people day in, day out. And we learnt a lot through Good Things Foundation as well with the kind of online centres network. When you go out and spend some time in those communities, you then get to understand the context of people's lives and some of those challenges. So I think for me, in order to understand that wider context, you need to take yourself out of the digital world that we live in and the attention that we put on the things on screens, and go and actually put yourselves in some of those situations, and then you'll really experience that. And a couple of years ago, one of my favourite projects was working with a homeless community down in Hastings on the south coast, and we kind of didn't really know where to start, and we just went, let's just go and spend some time there. So we kind of left laptops back at the office and just spent 2 days in the day centre, sitting down, having a meal, having a conversation, playing Scrabble, like doing all these things, but you were just kind of immersing yourself in that environment, and you start to pick up some of the things. So you could tell that there were, and I think at the time, the universal credit was being rolled out in that area. And I remember distinctly somebody sat at a computer in this quite busy, noisy room, clearly trying to access it, and it had failed on him for whatever reason, and his reaction was quite extreme, quite angry, quite vocal. He had a dog, his dog started going nuts, another dog in there started, and you just start to understand that people within that situation, there's so much more context to them accessing a web form to fill in some information to get access to some of that financing that they really need. And it's really not easy, so you've just got to think about that. There's no privacy in that situation for them. They're dealing around finances and personal information, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's getting yourself into those situations and experiencing it, seeing it, feeling that kind of tension. That's where you really start to get some kind of empathy for where people are in accessing things.
Yeah, that's a really great example, and I think it can be easy to spend a lot of your time maybe just on the internet nowadays and just using like technology, but until you do go out and you actually see how this stuff's really impacting people's lives on a day-to-day basis, like in that example, it's quite hard to become so empathetic, I suppose, because you can't visualize it until you've seen it. It's going to be hard to really imagine what's going on for those people, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So once you do get to know and understand what is really going on out there, and what's like the next steps in terms of actually providing more support and making things more inclusive?
For us, it's moving into and trying to do more co-design. For want of a better phrase, I know co-design gets bandied about a lot, and co-design, co-production, co-creation are all kind of different phrases that are used for different things. But what we're trying to do is not only create things that are inclusive, the services, the products that we're trying to kind of design, but actually make the process of creating those inclusive as well. So I'm sure you're aware, and I know I do some great work and kind of workshops and things like that, and traditionally a lot of our kind of co-design and our involvement has been, we'll run a workshop in our offices and you kind of invite people into your environment. And over the years we've sort of realised that you're creating a very false environment. You're getting people to come into your world, you're asking them to answer your questions, and people often feel like they need to tell you what you want to hear rather than what's real and things like that. So making that process more inclusive, going out and doing some of that work in those communities, involving them in the discussions, helping them to share their stories, share their experiences. We then have to advocate for that and make sure that when we're talking to the funders and the people with the kind of power, that we're able to kind of break that power balance down and kind of bring people into that design process in a much more equitable way for them as well, and making sure that there's a real issue with power there. Like I say, if you're creating an environment where they're coming to you, there's a real kind of issue in that sort of situation. So we're trying to at the moment really understand and break down some of those challenges and barriers of how do we make the process inclusive, much more inclusive than just getting their thoughts and opinions in when you want and them answering your questions. I think there's much more power in understanding and kind of helping them understand what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, what you believe is the right kind of thing and the direction you want to be going in, and then bring them into that conversation and help them kind of guide it and be really open to the fact that your ideas will probably be wrong, probably not what people need, but we're driven by our experiences, we're driven by the possibilities of technology that we think, it'd be amazing if an app had solved this problem, and it's like, might solve the problem for 10% of people that have got the access and the ability kind of thing, but how else can we solve that problem? And there's often many different ways that you have to think about that, and many different solutions, not just one.
Yeah, so you have to really go into that process with a very, very open mind, with no preconceived notion of how things are going to turn out, right? And on a practical level, how do you actually go about setting an environment which is more set up for like co-design, where, as you say, there's no kind of like levels in power with like someone coming to you? Like, how do you actually go about, going to talk to people on a practical level? Like, do you go to like certain centres, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. One of the things that we always look for is trust. And what I mean by that is, where do people feel they already have trust? Where do people feel comfortable? and we work with the people and the organisations and the places that they've already got that trusted relationship with, because it'll be in their time, in their space, in their kind of comfort. So that's one of the things that we always try to do, to go, okay, for example, we were talking about the homeless community in Hastings. We were able to work with an amazing organisation called Seaview, where people would come and spend their days. They'd get a hot meal, they'd get support, they'd get the ability to shower, all that sort of stuff. So it was a trusted environment with trusted people, and it was very much that we wouldn't go into that situation kind of all smart, dressed up, lanyard around us next, being all professional, because there's a lack of trust with services and kind of formality within that setting. So it was very much about us going down and not starting to impose our agenda in some of those conversations, but literally to go and start a conversation, just listen to that person's story, understand what matters to them first before we start to put our angle on it and just start to kind of ask them about technology and all this sort of stuff, but really understand what really matters to you, what are the challenges you're facing right now. So spotting those trusted relationships, those places, is really key to being able to take that first step. But like I say, it's a really difficult, complex thing to do, because you can kind of go into those environments and quickly be shut out of it as well. So.
Yeah. And in your career, how have you learned to approach such situations with such a open mind and that neutrality, where you just like go into talk to a person as a person?
That's a great question, really. I don't think I have a specific answer, but I think over time I've been lucky to be able to be exposed to those situations and put myself in situations which are really uncomfortable for me. I've done that with some incredible people, like colleagues as well, that have kind of been really supportive in that situation. I think just I've got a real keen interest in understanding what is happening, why things are happening, why things are working in the way or not working in the way they are. So I'm way more interested in that, and I've learned and kind of got a knack over the years, because you've got going into that situation and finding out this really kind of holistic view of the world, of people's challenges and stuff like that, but you're being funded at the other end of it by someone who's probably got a very specific view about what they're trying to achieve. So I think you go into those situations and try and be as impartial as possible, be really honest, be really open, try not to talk too much, to try and listen. Don't try and always relate to what people are saying as well, because I think it's really easy. I'm really terrible for this, but I'm really easy to go, oh yeah, I know someone like that, or I've had an experience, and I'm always looking for a way to kind of build a bit of rapport with people, because you kind of make those connections. But there is no way that I've experienced things that they've experienced. You know what I mean? No matter how much I think so. So there's a real kind of need to listen more than talk in those situations. And then as professionals, we then have to do a bit of that translation bit, where we go, actually, we're trying to achieve this. We've got a funder that's set up in this way. They've got this goal. They've got this outcome that they're trying to achieve. How do we make sure we advocate for what we just heard and make sure that that's factored in? So that's our role and our responsibility for making sure that we don't do anything to compound some of those situations or make things worse and things like that. And working in the NHS is great, because I think one of the founding principles around the NHS is like do no harm kind of thing. So it's something that we can kind of anchor ourselves to within that kind of context as well, which is great.
Yeah, that sounds really good that you like working with the NHS. It's like obviously such a great organisation to work with. But do you ever find difficulties if like someone's funding you and they have like a preconceived notion of perhaps what they want to do next, but then you go out and have a totally different conversation with the users? Is there ever any like difficulty in kind of like then going back to the person that's funding you with like a different answer to what they may have expected?
Yeah, always difficult. Yeah. It's really challenging, and I think we're experiencing that at the moment. We know things that we want to change in the way that we're approaching it, having some of those open conversations early on before funding's agreed and things like that, and being really clear about what our strengths are as a team, the fact that we will look to go and do that, look to go and explore and understand and uncover things that perhaps aren't in line with their thinking, and try and understand the appetite for that and the balance. But ultimately, like I say, we're commissioned to do these things. So there's a balance, I think, to be struck, and it sometimes it's in when you're thinking about like product development, like app development, things like that. It might be that we go out and discover an app's not going to solve this problem. Okay, we genuinely believe from the evidence that an app could be a really good vehicle for us to go and understand way more about that in detail, because you're putting something tangible out there, and you can go, right, we're now going to introduce this app, and we're going to work with this cohort of people or this audience, and we're going to try and engage with them. But we're going into it with, we're going to learn loads more through doing that than saying that that's the solution. So I think there's a real balance for us to go, we will support you to get to that point as well. If you're really keen or have to put this solution out into the world, but let's try and create that environment around it, that is a learning opportunity, not a we've solved it, let's move on kind of thing. Yeah.
So sometimes is it more about the process and the learnings then than the actual solution, because through those learnings you can then create other things in the future which is going to help even more, sort of thing?
Yeah, and I think a fundamental thing that we need to try and move or shift is the focus on, we talk about solutions, and I think that really clouds people's kind of judgment and thoughts on stuff, because a solution is a finite end to something. You go, right, we've solved that problem. And when we're talking about making things inclusive and accessible to people, that's impossible, right? You're never going to create something. Nothing has ever been created in this world that is truly inclusive and accessible to everyone. It's almost an impossible task, and we'll continue to fight for that. So I think the shift in mindset of going, everything we do should be improving things, should be making things better, should be starting to kind of focus on, okay, this is going to help us understand loads more, and it will be a great solution for a certain number of people, but we can't assume that that's job done. Like, if we really truly want to make the impact and have the impact and change the outcomes for people, we need to go into that really open-eyed and go, great, this is going to do a job, but we also, let's take an opportunity to put that out there and then look at what the impact is there. Look at all those people that are still unable to kind of hit their outcomes, get done what they're actually trying to achieve, all that sort of stuff. And why is that? Because then we can then start to continue to iterate, and a design approach is kind of an amazing way to do that. But it is really difficult because all of this is funded. You can't just keep doing this sort of thing. So there's this artificial end to projects, really, or to trying to solve problems that comes with funding and stuff like that. The NHS is typical of that, because so much is done in financial year and funded in that kind of cycle. So you get to the end of the year and go, right, the funding's done for that now. There might be some more funding next year, or there might not. It might be focused elsewhere. So yeah, it's a real challenge. Yeah,
it's really interesting. And I'd say what I've taken away from that is that in general people have a mindset that there's like an answer, a solution, whereas you could shift that to there just being continuous improvement, always learning, always developing, as an iterative process, as you said. So my final question for you, Tim, is what can people do to make things better? And you can interpret this however you like.
That's interesting. For me, fundamentally with that, it's understand what you're trying to make better and who you're trying to make it better for, and you need to go and spend time with those people. You will not know. Bring those voices into what you're trying to do, because if you try and do it yourself, you're just making assumptions, and you're more than likely going to make things worse for people, because you have no idea of the nuances around people's experiences, the challenges, the barriers that they have. So that'd be fundamentally, if you want to make something better, understand who you're trying to make it better for, and go and spend as much time with those people as possible, and bring them into that process and involve them as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an excellent answer. Where can people find you on like social media?
So you can follow me personally, so I'm at Tim Brazier on Twitter, but Tweets by Thrive as well on Twitter, and you can look at our kind of website, thrivebydesign.org.uk. A lucky position we're in is because we're part of the NHS. We are able to, we've got, kind of not really got any kind of commercial IP to a lot of our work. We do Creative Commons stuff, but everything we do and learn, we're trying to put out into the world and trying to share. So we're trying to do a lot of that on the website at the moment to make sure that we're promoting and sharing the insights that we're getting and the lessons we're learning and the work that we're doing. So yeah, there's quite a bit on there at the moment.
Yeah, amazing. Go follow Tweets by Thrive, is it?
That's the one.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Really enjoyed chatting to you. Thanks a lot for watching or listening, and we hope you have an amazing rest of your day.